Alrighty, today we are looking at OSC in Unreal. So OSC stands for Open Sound Control. It's a bit like MIDI. It's sort of like an open control, supposed to be used for musical instruments, but we're using it not for musical instruments. So it works across a wide variety of devices. There's some, you can get some digital DJ decks and stuff like that, some sound control panels. There's plenty of apps, Android, iPad, iOS, even on computer, and Unreal can send out OSC stuff as well as receive it, so you could even use Unreal to control Unreal through OSC. Which is a strange rabbit hole we won't be going down. So today we are going to be looking at the Touch OSC app. I'm going to be using it, but because it is an open standard, you can use anything. So there are plenty of other free apps on the App Store, but Touch OSC is really good and I recommend it. So this is my preferred method over web control for a lot of things, simply because there's some issues with web control and it's a bit tricky. This one's nice and easy to implement, and I like that. Easy is good. So what you will need if you're using Touch OSC is the Touch OSC editor. Otherwise you're going to need whatever it is that you use to edit your OSC thing, or in the case of some like decks and stuff like that, they can't be edited. So we're going to go through some of the things that you can add to Touch OSC here. I'm not going to go through all of them because they all work the same, so it's a bit silly to go through all of them because it's going to be a lot of repeated stuff. So OSC can do booleans, integers, and floats. Touch OSC only sends out floats, so it makes things a bit simple, but also I think a little unnecessarily difficult in some ways. So we're going to start by simply adding a push button just in the middle here, and that's it. So we have a few things over here. So this send on press, send on release, this is going to send a value on press and on release, and that's going to fire off an execution pin in a blueprint twice, essentially. It's like pushing and then releasing again. So we're going to untick send on release. So for the push buttons, the push button sends a value range from 0 to 1. Because it is a push button, it's going to be 0 or 1, yes or no, pushed or not. In Unreal, we're not even going to bother with that. We're just going to let it trigger the execution pin. Yeah, so we can just ignore that. So because we don't want to give it send twice, I'm going to untick the send on release. And then the last thing we have is the OSC address, which is this here. So it's /1/push1. You can change it if you want. I'm just going to leave them as is on their auto values. And this is what you're going to have to find the OSC address in your own app or deck or whatever if you're not using Touch OSC, which should not be difficult. So once you know the address for the buttons you're using, then it's going to be exactly the same. So we're going to go ahead and sync this magical layout to my iPad. So to do that, we're going to hit the sync button, and then on the iPad we're going to go into the menu, and under layout I'm going to go add, and I'm just going to choose my computer. I already have Untitled 1, so I'm going to overwrite it, and then that's it. So if we hit done, there is a nice big button in the middle. So I'm going to hit stop sync, and we're going to move over to Unreal and start. So first, make sure you have the plugin enabled. So under built-in, just type OSC, and it's right here, Open Sound Control, version 1.1. It's not in beta, so it's pretty stable. Now we're going to create a blueprint to use this. I like to make it its own blueprint to keep things organized. Obviously there's no blueprints anyway, but organization is always good. We're going to choose actor, and I'm going to call it OSC receiver, like that. We're going to open it up. We don't need to add any components to it because it's going to be a code-only blueprint. And we're going to go ahead and first start the OSC server so we can receive commands. So I'm going to delete these two and just use the event begin play. I'm going to type create OSC, and we want the server. So under receive IP address, I'm going to choose 0000, which if you remember from the web control stuff, that means anything coming, any IP address coming in from the like the outs, from the local network to this computer. If you type localhost or 127.0.0.1, then it'll only receive local that originated from this computer, which we don't want. So that's why I'm going to keep it like that. For the port, just choose. You can use anything. So unlike web control that was bound to port, I think it was 8080. You can choose anything. I'm just going to choose 8000 because I know there's nothing on my network that uses port 8000. I'm going to tick start listening. No need to add a server name. So the server, we're going to drag out and we're going to promote it as a variable. So I'm going to call this OSC Server. I'm doing this because I talked with someone at Epic because I was having some issues with this. Apparently, because this is on the event begin play, essentially the server can just be like this value. If we were just to use it without making it a variable, that would eventually go around and get collected with the garbage collector, and it would cease to exist, and so I get these random disconnects. And they reckon that's why. So that's what we're going to use. So first what we're going to do is we're going to unbind all events from OSC bundle received. This is just going to double check to make sure, especially when we restart the game or if something else happens, that's going to help us start from scratch. Next we are then going to bind an event to the bundle received. So make sure you do it in the right order. So we want message received, not bundle received, my bad. Good thing I made notes. Like that. Now, for the event, we're going to drag back from the event and type create. We're going to type create event, and under event, you can make a function. We're going to make an event instead, and I'm going to call it OSC message received. Like that. Now make sure this will say error. If you just compile it, it'll go back to saying a legitimate thing. So what's going to happen is we're going to make a server. We're going to then make sure that we're starting clean. We are then going to, when we receive any message at all to our OSC server from any IP address at all, then we are going to fire off this event. So this event also comes with some information. It comes with the OSC message itself. It comes with the IP address that sent it, so we can filter out and have, if you want an iPad and two iPads, they're going to have different IP addresses, so you can have them do different things while having the exact same interface. So if you had two cameras in your scene and you wanted two iPads with the same interface to control different cameras, that's how you could sort it. It'll also tell you what port the server received it on. Now, technically, it could only ever receive it on port 8000 in our case, so that's not going to be a problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag out, and then we're going to check our notes. So we're going to get the OSC message address. There we go, message address. And I'm going to plug the message in here. So this message address is going to be this right here, the /1/push. So we're then going to convert this message to a string. So convert address to string, like that. And so we're going to get this full path out. And for testing purposes, what we're going to do is we're going to type print string. And so we will now just print that straight to the log. So I drag out the OSC server, go ahead and hit play, and nothing happens. Then I hit the big touch button and nothing happens because we have not connected the touch OSC to our Unreal. So we go ahead, and what we need to do is get our IP address of our computer, because that's where we're sending things to. So open up command prompt and type ipconfig. There's other ways to get this, but this is the quickest. So this computer is on 192.168.1.22. So under host, I'm going to type that in, 192. 16A 1.22. Make sure I didn't screw something up. Port, we're on 8000, that is fine. So we're going to hit done. Done. Now if we go back to Touch OSC and hit done, we can close command prompt now. Now if we hit play and we hit the button, ta-da! So as you can see, that push, that /1/push1 matches up with this. So if we added a second button, for example, that's obviously got a /push2. So if we go ahead and sync this new layout to our iPad, layout, add there, yes, I'm happy with you to override it. So we now have two buttons. If we go into Unreal, we can then, that's push 1, that's push 2. And as you can see, that doubles up because we did not turn off the send on let go. So that is going to, so if you hook this up to say start the take recorder and you have that on, then it'll immediately stop it again because when you release it. But that's all good. So we are just going to use this path to determine what to do. So I'm going to delete that and we're going to use a switch on string node. So this is where you may want to think about a better naming scheme than this /1/push system. I'm going to keep it as is because we're not adding too many things. So I'm going to add out some pins, and the first one I'm going to do is be /1/push1. So now when we get a message, we are then going to fire, and it comes from push 1 button, then it will fire this pin off. And because it's a sort of a press button, we're not going to bother getting the value. All we want to know is when it is pushed. So if I add a print string to this and say push 1 pushed, push 1 pushed, and compile and save it. Now when I hit play and we push 2, nothing happens, but we push 1, it says push 1 pushed. So we can start hooking that up to things, which we're going to do in a minute. But what I'm going to do is go through and do two more things. So there is this, which is an X, Y, Z pad. Wait a minute. X and Y pad. There's no Z there. And the last thing is a fader or rotary fader. So rotary fader looks like that. It goes around in a circle. And a regular fader just goes up and down. They both work the exact same way in Touch OSC, so I'm only going to do one, but just know that you can use either or. So as you can see, it's given us automatically some names. We have some options. We can invert it. We can center it. In here we can invert some things. Whether we want to outline a background, color, all that sort of stuff. We're going to leave all that as is. One thing to know, these value ranges here, I would recommend you can set this to whatever you want. So if you wanted this fader to go from -12 to +12 or something, you can do that in here. My recommendation, however, is leave everything at 0 to 1 and do that inside Unreal. That way you always know, no matter what, that the values you're receiving from OSC are going to be 0 to 1. Makes things a bit nicer. So we're going to go ahead and sync this new layout because it's so pretty. Layout, add, yes, Touch OSC, done. So what are we going to do these controls on? Well, what I think we can do is we're going to use the fader up and down to set and rise the sun. The button, I'm going to trigger an explosion, and the XYZ pad, I'm going to move an object around. So what we're going to do first is we're going to add in the rest of our switch on strings. Stop layout. So we've got fader 1, and I think the other one was XY1. So 1, 1, fader 1. I think this one was XY1, 1, XY1. Let's double check. Yes, it was. Good. Alrighty, so now when we do our 3 different methods of moving, we are going to be able to trigger them. Next, what we are going to do is, what we are going to do, the first one's going to be trigger an event, the next one is going to set the sun, and the last one's going to move an object. So we're going to use, I think, let's say two types of blueprint communications in this. We're going to use a direct communication, and we are going to use a interface communication. I'm not going to bother with casting because that's only really if you're spawning objects in. So, what we're going to start with is the button to trigger the explosion. So I'm going to create a new blueprint called explosion. I think I did this in the web control tutorial, but I liked it, so I'm doing it again. So in the starter content under particles, actually, you know what? Why don't we do fire instead? Like that. So we're going to start and stop fire at the push of a button. All we want to do is we want to untick auto activate, like that. And then we are simply going to so next what we need to do is, so that we're going to use what's called an interface communication method for this one. So to do that, we need to create an interface. So that's under blueprints and then blueprint interface. I'm going to call this OSC control interface. Open it up, and we're going to create a new function. It's already asked us to create one. I'm going to call this trigger explosion. So an interface like this is going to be really handy if you have to trigger lots of things to do the same thing at once, if that makes sense. So with an interface, I can put as many of our fire, I'm going to rename that, around the map as I want, and then when I hit one button, they'll all be triggered at once, but I don't have to specify every single one. So in our fire, we're going to click on class settings at the top here, and under interfaces we're going to add our OSC interface. Here we go. So go ahead and compile it so they show up, and then if we type OSC trigger explosion, is that what I called it? Wait a minute. Trigger explosion. Oh, okay. So if I just type trigger explosion, here we go. So we can add an event called event trigger explosion, and so you can see the little interface logo here. That means this is going to be called through the interface in a different blueprint, and then when that is called, this is what's going to happen. So when it is called, I'm just going to use a flip-flop, and what we are going to do is drag out from our fire, and then I'm going to type activate. So the first time it is going to be activated, like so. Yep. And then the second time it's going to deactivate, like so. So now I trigger it once, the fire's going to start, trigger it again, the fire's going to stop. So now to trigger this interface, what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our OSC one, and we're going to get all actors with interface. So we're going to select our OSC interface, and so now this is going to bring out an array of objects that have that interface in it, no matter how many objects are in our scene. And so that's why this is really handy, because I don't have to make that list, I don't have to do anything like that. So long as the objects are using the interface, then we can get them like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out the array, and I'm going to type trigger, wait a minute, trigger explosion. So you can see here it says message, and we have a little like you have mail thing. That means this is going to be sent off through the interface to everything that implements it, and you should be able to drag the array of actors straight into that. So all the actors that have this interface, we are then going to trigger the explosion event in them. So you can have multiple events in an interface. You can have as many as you want. In this case, we're getting everything that has this, but we are only triggering the explosion one. So if you have other things in here with like fire, explosion, lightning, you know, but because we're only triggering the explosion, only the explosion event will be triggered. So that's all good. So we know this fires whenever we hit it. So this should work straight off the bat. So I'm going to drag fire out, and I'm going to drag a bunch of them out as a demonstration for how this works. Voodoo magic. Drag 5. Okay. Put there. Save. I'm going to hit play. Fly back. Now we hit the button and we just ignite the world on fire. And because of the flip-flop, we can make it all disappear. If only the bushfires last year could have done that as well, the push of a button, but that's for another time. So, yep, we have just implemented, and because we're using the interface, I can drag more fire out. Does not matter. We can have a lot of fire if we want, and I don't have to do absolutely anything. They'll all just work. Except apparently the lighting, which Unreal freaks out about for some reason with that many. Maybe because of the dynamite, I don't know. So we now have, we can now set our world on fire at the push of a button, which will be everyone's dream, I'm sure, if you could snap your fingers and set someone on fire. I'm going to delete a few of these because that's excessive. I'm going to have 3. Alright, so that is our interface communication method, which is, again, really good for these, like, lots of repeated things. If you needed, you wanted to hook a button up so all the alarms in a level go off at once, this is your best way of doing it. Stuff like that. Next, we're going to do direct communication. We're going to directly tell the sun, here it is, maybe I can line them up. We're going to directly communicate with the sun because there'll only ever be one of them in our world. So we don't need to worry about that as much. So I'm going to start by changing these to movable, simply because we can then move it without it freaking out about light baking. So in our OSC receiver, so to make a direct reference, we are going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it sun. And under the variable type, we're going to type directional light, and I'm going to make an object reference, and I'm going to make it public. So now, if we click on our OSC like that, we now have an option to choose our directional light under here. And so we're directly referencing this actor, or this, yeah, actor, or light, I guess it is. So what we are going to do, I'm going to set that as like a sunset on this fader. So I'm going to find my variables, like the variables or things I want to use. So I think I'm going to go, maybe if we go -90, there we go. So maybe if I go -90, which is the top of this fader, to 90. That should be nighttime. Yep. Alrighty. So I go -90 to 90. Alrighty. So we are then going to get data from our message. So what does that look like? So we drag out from our OSC message like so, and we can get OSC float at index. So this is going to get us our data, yeah, like our OSC data. I'm going to put that there. So we know for a fact that this is sending float data. We can say value from range, and touch OSC only sends floats. We also know that there's only going to be one thing. So this only sends one value. So in the case of this XY pad, it'll actually send 2 float values, the X and the Y. This one's only sending 1. So we know that index 0 is going to be the value we want. So what we are going to do is we are going to drag off of this. We're actually going to drag off of the variable, and we are going to map range clamped. So we know for a fact that this is sending a 0 to 1. 0 is actually at the top and 1's at the bottom because I put this in the editor upside down. So we know the range is going to be 0 to 1, and I decided our actual range is going to be -90 to 90. So I want the sun up to be all the way at the top. So I think I'm going to screw this up. I'm going to put -90 and then 90, like so. File, save. We are then going to drag out a reference to our sun, and I'm going to set rotation, set actor rotation, drag out there, and split this, and that was on the y-axis, wasn't it? Yes. So I'm going to plug that into the y. X is 32. I'm going to keep these values the same, and that's -120. Like so. So now I save, and we hit play, and I drag this along. You can see sun up, sun down. But that doesn't look very good. Why is that? You may know that the sky sphere has this refresh material which is required to do it. So what we're going to then do as well is make another direct reference to the sky sphere. So I'm going to call that sky sphere, and I'm going to call it my shoulder. We're going to use the, I think it's BP_sky. There we go. Object reference, we're going to make it public as well. So now in here we can then, in our OSC, here we go, we can now choose with the sky, because there's only ever going to be one of these as well. That's why we can do this. Or that's why this is the best way of doing this. So what we're going to do is we're going to drag out, and it's actually a construction thing, but I think we can still trigger it. So if I don't refresh material, we can call that function from inside this blueprint, like so. So now this is really simple. We're simply going to move the sun using this set actor rotation, and then we're just going to make sure we refresh the material automatically after every time. So this is because every time you have your finger on Touch OSC, it's sending constantly at the pretty much at the tick rate of Unreal. This is going to update the sky sphere like 100 times a second. That's okay though, because it's not very heavy on performance. So now if I hit play, the only other thing is the skylight. I don't think, yeah, we could go ahead and do the exact same thing that we did for the material here, and recapture the skylight every time as well, but I'm going to just delete it. Save the problem. So now, there we go. Sun up, sun down. Nice. Golden hour, sunset, all the way up, and so that's, look at that, and you get that really fine granular control because it is a, I want to say analog input, but it's like it's an analog input on a digital device using digital. It's like, but you get the idea. Like we have a very fine control over it to get right where we want, and that's so much easier to set up your own custom system to do this than it was with web control. Because if you were to program your own web control to just do this, that'd be a nightmare. Only problem is you can get OSC working inside the editor like web control without running the game, but that is a tutorial for another day perhaps. So the last thing we have is moving around an object using the XYZ pad. It's going to be the most complex. So we're going to go back to our OSC receiver. I'm going to make a event. So type custom event. I'm going to call this move objects. I'm going to do this just to keep things clean. So from this one, I'm just going to call the custom event, which was move objects, like that. That way I can now build over here, and then that's not going to get any messier. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to get message float at index. Float at index. And I want 2 of those because we're going to get 2 things. So the second one is going to be at index 1. Like so. So for the message is this. Like so. I'm going to move that over a bit. Somehow neaten it up. Been attempting to make things neater, just so it's easy to read in video. So, and when you download the project. So what we're going to do is I need to double check these are the right values. So we're going to print them. I'm going to add a print string at the end of this. And what I'm going to do is add an append node. And I'm going to make 4. So I'm going to say index 1 colon space, and then I'm going to plug the value into B here, and then I'm going to type index 0. Yep, and then index 1 colon space, and drag that into there. Alright, so print string is your best friend when it comes to debugging things. So now if I go here, we make it sunny, I'm going to go up on the pad, and that is looking to me like it is index 1. I think it's upside down as well, because 0 is top. So that is index 1 is Y, because Y to the sky, and 0 is top, which means index, yeah, there we go. Index 0 is X, and 0 is left. X, 0 left. Alright. Now we did that little bit of debugging, we can delete these. So it is X and Y. So we did get around the right way. So we're going to use more of those map range clamped. Map range clamped. In this, however, I'm going to go, so we know it's 0 to 1. And 0 to 1. In the out range, I'm just going to turn it to -1 to +1. That way, what we're essentially doing is making the exact center of the pad 0. So next, what we need is what's called a dead zone. So if you play video games and stuff, you know what this is. But essentially, because it's going to be near impossible to get this in the exact center where it's 0, 0, we want a small area in the middle where, so if we're around the center, it's going to be 0, 0. And to do the dead zone, what we're going to do is drag out from our return value, and we're going to do a greater than and a less than. Sorry, that is a greater than, and then this one is a less than. So if the number is greater than, say, -0.1 or less than 0.1, so it's between those two values, and so we want an AND boolean, then that is going to be our dead zone, and we're going to do the exact same for the other one. So there, and there. And so that's how dead zone's done. And so adjust this number to where you feel comfortable with your dead zone. Lastly, what we're going to do is we're then going to find something to update the location of. I am going to move that back to -90, like so. And I'm going to update this. So there we go. Alrighty, so I think I'm going to go this chair. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new variable. I'm going to do a direct reference again. I don't even know what I typed there. Movable actor. Like so. So what we can do then is we can actually reference just a straight actor. So you can reference any of these, like the sun and the sky sphere, using a direct actor rather than the specific blueprint. The only problem is we then won't have automatic access to its own functions, like the refresh material. But because we want this to be sort of a more broader usable thing, we're going to just leave it as that. So I'm going to change this chair to movable. Grab our OSC receiver. Did I compile it? Oh, I didn't make it public. There we go. Compile. There we go. So I'm going to change it to, shoot, which chair was it? Chair. This chair. I might rename this chair just for my insanity. Move chair. There we go. Now if we go on OSC and we find the move chair, there we go. So I'm going to go into OSC. So you can set this up two ways. What we're doing is setting it up like an Xbox joystick, where you sort of push it and then you sort of pull it back to the center to stop things. You can set it up how it was set up the stage mover was in the web control, where it's like this is a maximum distance from the center sort of thing, and so you can't continually forever go in one direction, which is another way of doing things. And that would be a case of, so we're going to use an add relative location. If you were to do it as like a hard stop, then you would use the map range clamp to map it to your maximum distance, so say 300 and negative 300, and then you would just do a set relative location, not an add relative location, if all that makes sense. So we're going to do that. We're going to do the add relative location. We're not going to use the default route. We are going to use our referenced actor. Alright, so it needs to be a scene component. Sorry, it'll be a add actor, local offset, location. Add actor world transform. That's going to be the one. Split. Just like that. Alrighty, so then what we are going to do is we're going to plug that into this. Like that. I'm going to split out this struct pin. So we said y was this second value. So I'm going to drag these down. I'm going to drag out of y and I'm going to type select float. And we're going to plug in our dead zone into this. And so if we are within our dead zone, we're going to pick A, which is going to be 0. If we're not, we're going to choose B, which is the map range clamp. And then we're going to do the same for this one. So select float. Move this back a bit for room. Like so. So we're going to then get our dead zone. Plug it in there and plug this value into B, like so. And so now that is going to move it around like an Xbox joystick, hopefully. So now if I hit play and move it back a bit, let's just move the sun somewhere nicer, and then I can what do we do? Oh, I put it in Z. Wait a minute, that's supposed to be an X. That would be Y. There we go. Whee. Yeah. So you can use this to move the camera around, you can use this to rotate a camera around, you know, all that and some. If we want to speed things up, you can change the clamp, but what I'm going to do is just go float by float. And so if we type 2, then we're doubling the speed. Same here, float by float. Boop. And so double the speed like that. The dead zone's a little large as well, so I might actually drop it to -0.05. Same here, negative and 0.05. And there's no reason you can't use the like get forward vector, world vector, and stuff like that. So this always goes forward. There you go. That speeds up. That makes it a bit quicker. Well, it's a funky game controller, but it is one nonetheless. There you go. So we've successfully done OSC control. I'm moving a chair around with a stick. The future is now, old man. I can also set and raise the sun using this dragger thing, and I can set the world on fire with a push of a red button. We have our evil mastermind plan is complete, so to speak. Could turn back off again. And so using that functionality, you know, it's the same thing. Like I said, the rotary encoders. No, not that one. Sorry, the rotary faders. Here we go. Work the exact same way as this one. So they're easy to program. Same with the toggle button. That'll just be always on. So things like the battery and the label, you can actually send data from Unreal back to OSC, but I'm still working on that. But then we can have things update on the app as to what's happening in Unreal. So like with our sun controller, we could then say at the top what the sun's position is. So keep an eye out for that. These multi-push ones, this is where those float variables come in. So it'll be like float 1, index 1, index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4. You're probably going to be better off just doing manually lots of buttons. It's probably going to be a bit easier. Same with the multi XY and the multi faders. That's going to be index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's one more thing on here, encoder. If you've tried out, you're probably gone like, oh wait, that's probably a much better joystick. This sends a value of 0 to 1 based on whether you're spinning it clockwise or anti-clockwise, which is not quite. And then I think the number increases the faster you spin it in that direction. It's like a record deck. They scratch it, whatever. I know that's not what it's actually called, but I don't know what it's called. That's what it's supposed to be. So you can't use it like a thumbstick, I'm afraid, which is really annoying, but that's just how it is. But other than that, cool beans. Thank you for watching. If you would like to download this project for yourself, head on over to my Patreon. There is also a already set up OSC camera controller with things like the exposure and the white balance and the moving the camera around and stuff with OSC. That's already on there. They've had that for a week and a bit now as an exclusive. So if you want something like that, go check that out as well. But otherwise, thank you for watching, and I will see everyone later.